What does the word Candace mean? Candace. How about it, Candace? Who remembers what Candace means? Candace? It's a title for a very high, powerful queen, basically in the Nubian area in Africa. Okay, so that's what it means. Candake or Candace. We talked about last week about the Ethiopian eunuch, and that he was the servant of this very high, powerful queen of Ethiopia, Candace. And many people say, well, see, there was no queen named Candace there at that time in Ethiopia. See, the Bible's not true. But if you study, in reality, last week I gave you the whole period of time when these rulers, these feminine rulers, ruled. What was the other one in the Bible? What was a set of rulers? What was the name of those rulers? There was more than one. What? No. No. We're on a different page. Okay, in the Bible. In the Bible, what was another name of rulers? It was handed down. What? Well, Pharaoh, yes. But Abimelech. There was more than one Abimelech. What does Abimelech mean, Brother Roger?
Father of the king.
Father of the king. Melech means king, and Abba means father. Okay. So we got that down. Now, I've got another question to ask you. When you were growing up, who did you want to be like? Roger, did you have some goal? Amber, do you have a goal who you want to be like when you grow up? How about Sharon, Brother Mike, David, Abe, David over here? Bill, did you have somebody that you wanted to be like?
Audie Murphy.
Audie Murphy. All right, well, that's quite a goal. Well, Sister Andino and young Sister Andino, you know who I'm talking about, Benjamin Marcus Bogart. Do you know who he was? In volume 1 of The Life and Times of Benjamin Marcus Bogart, there's 3 volumes of it, but in volume 1, he got to meet a very famous man in his life, and that famous man, well, 2 famous men, and that was Jesse and Frank James. Now, the Daltons, the Youngers, and the James were forced into outlawry. Some of the Daltons were a little bit outlawry by themselves. But the Youngers were very reputable citizens, and they owned 7 farms. Their father, they were Northern sympathizers. I want you to understand this. The Youngers were Northern sympathizers. The father was. The Union came through there and just ravaged that country. Just ravaged that country. They stole all of the livestock off of 7 big farms that the Youngers had, and they caught Mr. Younger out there. This is Union soldiers. They caught him out with a large amount of money, and he was a postmaster. He was the one that kept all the posts, the mail system going, and through all of these 7 farms. They caught him out there and shot him and sold quite a bit of money. I think it was $2,500 in cash that was on him. Those boys went and joined Quantrell in the South. That drove them to that. They hated the North after that. How many of you saw the movie Shenandoah with Jimmy Stewart? The first part of that movie, we see these Union soldiers coming in, and they ravage and rape and they murder some of the family of this very wonderful man. And the whole story is about that. We're trying to recover from that. That happened a lot. Sherman, when he went through the South, he raped and pillaged. And they could not beat Lee at all, toe-to-toe, man-to-man. Lee whipped the socks off of him. He was their schoolmaster at West Point. Lee was a great master. He was a great logician. He was a great strategist. With less numbers all the way through, he won battle after battle after battle. Abraham Lincoln could hardly. He finally got Sherman, And they finally had to whip him by basically going beyond the rules of war. There was a lot of devastation in the South. After the killing of Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln wanted to be very gracious to the South. But Johnson got in his place, and Johnson hated that. He was a former slave. Johnson was a former slave, remember. Andrew Johnson was a former slave. And so he hated slavery, and he really abused the South and what's what we call the carpetbaggers and everything. Well, the James, the Daltons, and the Youngers, they came all the way out of California. Jesse James came all the way out here. Not too long ago, just a few years ago, they found a great cache of gold up here. Remember in Northern California where they found all that gold? You know who put that there? Jesse James. They were going to start another nation. Cole Younger and the Daltons, when they robbed that Northfield, Minnesota bank there, by the way, the James weren't there. When they robbed that bank, they were going to get that money because that man had killed their father, the president of that bank. See, you don't know the rest of the story. They were going to go down and go to Cuba or South America and start another nation so they could have freedom because they couldn't live here in safety. Jesse James had to fake his own death. He lived until November the 9th, 1935, buried in his son's grave. I mean, this was cryptic. This is what they call Knights of the Golden Circle. Well, these boys would go from Baptist church to Baptist church, these James boys. Robert James established 5 missionary Baptist churches, which are still in existence today. That's Jesse James's father. He changed his name. And all of these people, they had to do this. Jesse and Frank James went from Baptist church to Baptist church. Jesse and Frank were deacons, basically. Frank preached, and we talked about preaching deacons here. They went from church to church. One day they stopped at Ben Bogard's house where his father was a deacon, and Jesse James slept in the bed with Benjamin Bogard, little Ben. From that time on, he wanted to grow up and be a Jesse James and go out there and make things right. The banks came in after the South, the Reconstruction. They would get control of farms, and they would take it away from the people. They had to build their homes because Sherman had burned them all down. They had to build their buildings again. And so they had to borrow money from the banks, and the banks would take the land. The railroads went through, and they took the land. So guess what they were doing? They were robbing the railroads and the banks. And they stole almost $2 million altogether. And a lot of it was cashed all over the place. But anyway, Ben Bogard, he started shooting. He wanted to shoot and be a bank robber and a robber of trains just like Jesse James. Finally, after he got up a little time, Jesse James was getting to be a real good shot and everything else, and all he had on his mind was going and doing like Jesse and Frank James did and straightening out society from guerrilla warfare. That's what it was. And then Jesse James' father decided that he was going to try to make an impression on his boy, so he took him to a public hanging. And in Volume 1, it tells you all about this. Now, I don't have the name of the man down. I wish I had written it down before, but I forgot because I got in late last night. Didn't have my books with me when I worked on this. Anyway, he took him to this hanging, and this man had raped a woman and killed her husband. Now, that's a kind of a double crime, isn't it? Both of them are capital offenses. This man, they took him out there, and he was a Catholic. And they brought the man. There was like 1,000 people out here. They built this scaffold out in a public square, and they're going to hang this man. This is a public hanging because public executions is a deterrent to crime, and that's what they were doing. Well, they brought the man out there, and he was in chains, and they brought him up to the foot of the scaffold, and, there's 13 steps. That's why the number is 13 is, that's bad luck. They brought him up there, and he got up to the top of the steps, and he said, "Do you want to say anything?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "I want to tell you that this trial was a sham, that you had to bribe and pay witnesses because there was no witnesses to what I did." But he said, I did it. Right, I did it. But there was no witnesses. I was tried illegally and wrong. But he said, I did it. He said, I raped and I killed. I raped that woman, I killed that man. I did it. And the priest got there and he stuck a sprig of evergreen in his pocket, for the resurrection, Then he gave him the last unction and everything, and little Ben is sitting back over there, and he said, this man is going through pagan rites, and he could be saved, and he's going to die right now. He's going through the last things, and here he could be saved. Well, he's thinking about what's going on. Now, this is a great big guy. He's about 6'2" and weighs about 260 or 70 pounds, and a big, robust man. They get him up there, and they tie the rope on his neck, and they finally say the prayer. The priest says the prayer and everything. They pull the trap door, and he falls through it, and he breaks the rope, and he's down there screaming and growling like that. Usually when that happens, what do? They say it's an act of God and turn him loose. This guy had done two things worthy of death. So they threw a lasso over the top of the scaffold, drug it down to the trap drawer, and ran down there. The guy's still tied up and everything, strangling and going on because the rope is stuck around his neck and tight around his neck. It didn't break his neck or anything. So they slowly pull him up, going and wiggling all over the place like this. And he finally just wiggles, and his bowel turned loose and all of this stuff, and Ben is sitting there watching this. Time that gets through, he doesn't want to be Jesse James anymore. He's going to change his occupation. Sister Andino, what was he? One of the greatest Baptist preachers in the history. He preached from the 1800s to 1950-something. You can hear him preach on the sermon audio. You go there, I think there's about 4 messages of only there. He won't tell you about this, but I heard the stories about this. He sat there all night long with Jesse James with that big pistol on his belly, and when he woke up that morning, I want to be just like him. That was his hero. Let's go and see something about heroes in the Bible. We have a guy here that is many people's hero, and that's the Apostle Paul, isn't it? The Apostle Paul is a lot of people's hero, yes or no? How many people want to be like the Apostle Paul? How many people want to be like Peter? Yeah. All right. These are heroes of the Bible, aren't they? Well, let's go into Acts, the 9th chapter. Acts chapter 9. Now Saul still breathing threats. Now in Greek, it's a lot more dramatic than that. But the Saul still breathing out and threatening and even murdering. Threatening and murdering. You know what murdering is? That's what happens in war and all these things. They go and they murder people. They're killing. Now this to Saul this was war. This was war against Judaism and Christianity, and he hated Christianity with a passion, didn't he? He hated Christianity. He hated Christ. He had stood by when they stoned Stephen. Back in the 7th chapter we talked about Stephen. Stephen was out there, and the Apostle Paul, his name was Saul at that time, he was the executive of the Sanhedrin, and he told them to throw the first stone. And he held the clothes of those witnesses and people that stoned Stephen. And he was probably one of those people that went and bit Stephen with his teeth, because it said they kept on chewing on him with their teeth. It said gnashing at him, but that's not what it says in Greek. He was chewing like dogs would bite you. With hate, like a ballroom ball where people bite people's nose off, their lips, their ears, and all of that, and just bite people. Hateful people. That's what the Apostle Paul was. He was a hater of Christianity. And Saul still breathing and threatening and murdering against the disciples. That word mathetos there. The disciples, mathetes. What does that mean? The habitual learners. What is the commandment? It's not go you therefore, but what is it in Matthew 28, 18 to 20? Make disciples. That's what they were. He is killing the disciples. And by the way, the first disciples were called those of the way. Those of the way. Okay? Those of the road. Against the disciples of the Lord. And approaching the high priest, he kept on asking from him. He did this more than once. He kept going back and getting more death warrants, is what they were. Letters. He was going to go to Damascus. He's going to go to Damascus. Asked for letters from him to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, see that? The way of Christ, both men and women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem if they got them there alive. Remember my great-great-grandfather Sam Paul? How many people did he bring in alive? That Rooster Cogburn story and everything. How many people did he bring in alive? Remember, he was bringing old John Farrell in. He went and arrested him, took him home, and set him down to his table there, fed him a fried chicken dinner and corn on the cob, and gave him brandy for dessert, took him up to the guest bedroom where the chains and the fetters were. When he walked in there, John Farrell said, and by the way, he said, "Thank you, Indians. You're really quality folk." You know, they were Indians. "Thank you, Indians." He takes him up there to that bedroom. When he walks in there, he looks down and he sees those chains and handcuffs. He said, "What are you going to do with those?" He said, "I'm going to put them on you. My family will be safe tonight." "You ain't putting them on me." He said, "I'll put them on you or I'll kill you." And when he reached down to get him, old John Farrell jumped out that front room window and hit the ground out there the second story down. Sam Paul pulled his pistol out and shot him in the leg and broke his leg, and cussing him all the way down those stairs out there. "You should have been asleep up here in this feather bed right now," but he said, "instead of that, you're dying out in my front yard. You've ruined my whole night. I treated you like a prince in my house, and you turned against me, and you're dying out in my front yard. You've ruined my whole evening." He walks out there, and old John Farrell, he's begging all the way, "Oh, please, Mr. Paul, don't shoot me, don't shoot me." And then when he gets close to him, he said, "Oh, God, don't let him kill me." Sam Paul gets up there and looks at him. This is a historical fact. He looked down at him. He said, "It's not between you and God, me and God. It's between me and you." And boom, you're a dead man. No more mercy. No more mercy. No more. He didn't take him in. He got to go to trial at Judge Isaac Parker's court. And he set him free because it was justifiable. He was trying to escape, He was. Let's go back. Now, these poor people here, if they got to Jerusalem alive through the Apostle Paul, because he kept murdering people, didn't he? Maybe tie him around the neck just a little bit too hard where he's dragging them on the ground and they're dead by the time you get there. And he came about as he journeyed. He was approaching Damascus. And by the way, I've been here to this place. He was approaching Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. Now, there are 3 different places in the book of Acts. In Acts 9:1, 22, 1 through 14, and 26, 1 through 13, where Paul tells his story. Now, this is what happened. Luke records this down for us in 3 different places. This book of Acts, many people believe, is Luke's defense of Paul before the Roman government, to show him that he was only doing and show him that he was on the other side one time. It's pretty convincing when somebody was on the other side and they write a letter or whatever. A light shined all around him, from heaven, and he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, Sheol, Sheol, Sheol." This is a word right here in Hebrew. What does that word mean, Sharon? Huh?
King?
What?
King? Wealthy?
No. How about it, Brother Roger? Sheol. Saul. The place asked about. And the first king of Israel was Saul, which was the one asked for. Sheol and Saul come from the very hell. That's the word hell, Hades. Come from the same word. He said, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And he said, "Who are you, Jehovah?" Adonai, Kyrios. That's what he said. Who are you? He knew that this was God speaking to him. And he said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. What a turnaround in his life right there, huh? God drops him to the ground. Drops him to the ground. But rise and enter the city, and you must be told what you must do. So here now, God stops him. The Apostle Paul, how many of you have rejected Jesus Christ over and over and over in your life before you did get saved? How many of you did that? You know that you can reject Jesus Christ over and over again to where you're damned? You're born of Satan? Did you know that? This man was. Here we have a special exception to the rule here today. And we're going to look a little more about it later on. And the men who traveled with him stood speechless. And by the way, it says they heard the voice but didn't understand anything what it was saying. It was just rumbling to them. Just rumbling. You know how that is, Brother Rex, just rumbling? You can hear the words but can't understand the speech, and that's exactly what they did. And the men who traveled with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, literally it's phone, the sound, but seeing no one. And Saul got up from the ground. Though his eyes were open, he could not see a thing. And they, leading him by the hand, they brought him to Damascus. Now, you know what? Maybe this whole bunch got converted. Who knows? Maybe these were assassins that he was taking along with him. They had assassins, didn't they? Was the Apostle Paul, was he an assassin? Was he part of the Sicarii? Yes, he was. He was part of the Sicarii. These are the ones that stood at Masada at the last. Judas was an assassin, and then we have Simon that was assassin, and Paul. We got 3 assassins in that bunch. And he was 3 days without sight, and he didn't eat, nor did he drink. Verse number 10. Now there was a certain disciple in Damascus, his name was Ananias. Now that is not correct. Brother Roger, you know that I don't point Hebrew very much. But this word right here, that is the word. Can you tell me, it comes from chana and yah. What is that word? What does that word mean? Chananaya. 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 Yah at the end of any word in Hebrew, or in a word in Hebrew, means what? Sharon? Jehovah. Jehovah. So this man means favored by, Chana, favored by Jehovah. That's what and his name is not Ananias, it's Hananias. Hananias. And even in Greek, it's Hananiah. Hananiah. His name is Hananiah. Hananiah. Favored of the Lord. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias, or Hananiah. It's really Hananiah. They got it in King James as Ananias, but that's not what it is. It's Hananiah. And he said, Behold, here I am, Lord. And of course he uses the word for Jehovah there. And the Lord said to him, Arise and go to a street called Straight. Sister Andino, you ever been over there in that place? Did you get to go over there to Damascus? No. I've been on this street called Straight, and I have been in this ancient church house where the church house was, where this man lived. There, it's still there in that city. The street called Straight. And inquire at the house of Judah, for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for behold, he is praying. And he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias, Hananiah, come in and lay his hands on him that he might regain his sight. And Hananiah answered, Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much harm, much murder, much torture he did to your saints in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call upon your name. Verse number 15. But the Lord said to him, Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine. He is a skuos ekloges. Skuos means a vessel. How many of you, your body is a vessel? What makes up your body? Brother Roger, what makes you up?
Mind, body, and spirit.
You have mind. What part of the mind? What is that? What resides in the mind? The soul. And so your spirit and your body. And that body is a vessel, is a container for the soul and the spirit, isn't it? Yep. That's what it is. It's a vessel. Now, can we be a vessel for God or a vessel for Satan? Can we? You are a vessel for God, or you are a vessel for Satan. One or the other. There is no in between. There is no in between. Brother Abe was talking about digital languages. You know that the last sound that came from that great ship that went down, remember that great ship? What was the name of that great ship? The Titanic. You know what the last sound there was? It was a digital sound. Dot it, da da da. Dot it, da. That's CQ. They were hollering CQ for help. Dot it, da da. That's digital. My call sign is, you'll say this, it says this is da dit da dit da da did all. And what is that? That's long and short sounds. The last thing that came from that ship before all these people died was that digital sound. Dot it, da da. If you leave this world without knowing Jesus Christ as your Savior, one or the other, either you are or you're not, you're sealed forever in that state. Now the Apostle Paul was an exceptional. God chose him. The word skies means vessel, and then what about ekloges? Ekloges. What does that ekloges mean? Ek means what? Look up there at the sign. What's that ek mean? Now that's basically literal. Ek is out of what? Out of it. Out of this room. Out of it. Ekit means out of it. The word Lego means to pick out. Like a little bird will go. How many of you go out in the park and watch pigeons going out there picking things up and doing this and that? You go out in the ocean and you see birds picking things up. They'll pick this up and they'll pick that up. Sometimes they'll spit something out. That's where this word Lego comes from. Lego means I speak or I say. The word in Hebrew is davar, which means the same thing. It means to line up in a row. Lego means to line up in a row and to pick out things, to pick out communications, to communicate with people. But it means picked out. Now he said, this is a vessel that I have picked out. This is an elect vessel. The Apostle Paul picked him out. Now let's go to 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, real quick. 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, verse number 7. Now, the Apostle Paul is talking to the church at Corinth. Yes, Brother Mike.
I believe we have a mechanical malfunction.
Here, a beeping.
What?
A beeping.
It's my breathing.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
All right. In 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, Paul is writing to the church at Corinth, and he's telling them about himself, what happened, why he is an apostle. And he's talking about the resurrection of Jesus Christ in the first few verses. He also tells about what the gospel is, the plan of salvation, plainly, doesn't he? Then he gets over there, verse number 7. Then he appeared to James and to all the apostles. And at last of all, to one, it says, untimely born. He appeared to me also. For I am the least of the apostles, who am not fit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am. And his grace toward me did not prove in vain, but I labored even more than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God with me. Whether then it was I or they, so we preach, and so you believe. Now, let's go back up to the first part of this. And at last of all, as it were one untimely born. And the word here is to ektromati. He was aborted. This is what you call an abortion. This is a forced abortion. I see things on the internet every now and then. It says pray for the unborn killed, that are killed all the time. Every day, little children are killed that are unborn. The only good thing about that is that every one of them get to go to heaven. That's good. That's every one of them get to go to heaven. We talked about that last Wednesday night in 1 Timothy, the 4th chapter. The one aborted. Had Paul heard the gospel? Had Paul heard the gospel? What had he done? He had turned his heart against God, and he began killing people that believed the gospel, hadn't he? And so God is going to use him an example to us. Just a simple example. He was a student of Gamaliel. Gamaliel means what? Gamaliel, this comes from the word camel, doesn't it? What does the word camel mean? Gift of God. Just think about that, gift of God. Those two Hebrew students there. Gift of God. Gamaliel was his teacher. What did Gamaliel tell the Jews to do with Jesus' disciples? He said, leave them alone. His own master teacher told him to leave them alone, but the Apostle Paul hated these people. He wanted them murdered. He had murdered them. He wanted to kill them. He was a killer, wasn't he? A murderer. He said, last of all, I, one that is aborted. He appeared to me also. This elected one. Now, we talk about election. We talk about what we call anti-sublapsarian, we call supralapsarian, we call infralapsarianism, we call sublapsarianism and postlapsarianism, and that's all of the different identifying marks of people that believe in Calvinism or Calvinist. And I am a modified sublapsarian Calvinist, even though I would be that whether Calvin ever was born or not. Calvin just lined it out as tulip. Total hereditary depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and preservation of the saints. And those that are 5-point Calvinists believe all of that are called supra or anti-lapsarians. Okay? Supra or anti-lapsarians. Now we're all elected. In eternity past, God wrote our names down in the Lamb's Book of Life, didn't he? And God created man in his triune image. In Genesis 1:26, it says what? The first way that he created man, the first thing, he created man in his shadow casting likeness. So what is that? What part of you is that? Your spirit. And then he says, and his blood flowing likeness. It says in his image, but literally it says in his blood flowing likeness, and the root of that word is dom. Dom. The other word is ruah. All right? Ruah. We have the word dom. And then what? He created in his spiritual likeness and his blood flowing likeness. The spiritual likeness was like Spirit God. His blood flowing likeness is what? Like the pre-incarnate Christ. And then it says, in his sovereign image. Let him have sovereignty over all of the things, including his own soul. Now, God created man in his image, didn't he? How did Adam create man? In his image. Was Adam sovereign? His children are sovereign. They're created in the triune image of God. Spirit, Son, and Father, literally. Spirit, Ruah, Son, Dom, and the Father in his sovereign image. Okay? 3 triune images. Now, every man has, and animals to a certain extent have volition. We know that. Did the snake have volition in the garden? The Nahash. What did he do? He chose to let Satan use him. And did God curse him because of that? Because you have allowed it. So did the serpent have volition? It did. Did the animals in the different insects and animals in Egypt have volition when he called them? They came, didn't they? You know, if mankind could only act like animals sometimes, we'd be a lot better humans. How many dogs do you see run off and leave their children, their babies, their pups? How about birds? How many mamas do you see do that? Bakersfield's full of them. It would be a lot better sometimes if children act more like animals. We say, you act like an animal. No, they don't. They act like an Adamic human. That's what they act like, an Adamic human. Going a little bit further. Now, the Apostle Paul had a choice. He made the choice wrong, and God used this man. He just ripped him out of the claws of Satan. How many people have been ripped from the claws of Satan? We're all in his claws when we're in this world. Before we're saved, we're in his clutches. Aren't we? Has he got you? You think you're doing your own thing? That's a sad mistake. You're doing Satan's thing. You're not doing your own stuff. Let's go on a little bit further now. See how far we can get with this today. He said, the Lord said to him, go, for he is a chosen instrument. He is a skues eklogos. He is a picked out one. A chosen vessel of mine. To bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel. The Gentiles, kings, and the sons of Israel. Now, did the apostle do that? Did the apostle Paul do that? Yes, he did. For I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. Boy, you've been poured it on. And what did the apostle say? Paul say in the 15th chapter? Let's go back there for just a moment and let's look and see what he said. He appeared to James and to all the apostles, and last of all, as to one aborted. I was an abortion. He appeared to me also, for I am the least of the apostles, for I am not worthy, I am not fit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church belonging to God. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace to me did not prove vain, but I labored even more than all the men. Yet not I, but the grace of God with me. Sometimes you see people that are in cults, and they get saved. Have you ever done that? People in cults get saved. And sometimes when they get saved, people in Catholicism, when they get saved and come out, boy, they wonder at the grace of God, don't they? People in Mormonism, and I don't know very many of them. Do you know a Mormon got saved? Yeah, there aren't very many. That's their idea of God is so perverted that it's very hard for them to be saved. It's pitiful. Jehovah's Witnesses, we see some of them that are saved occasionally. And you know what they do? They work hard for being a Jehovah's Witness, don't they? Because they work their way to heaven. And sometimes they're very zealous for the Lord, even more zealous for the Lord. Zealous for the Lord. Well, here was a man caught up in what had become a cult. Jesus told Israel, you are bankrupt. You are bankrupt. Well, this is one of the people that murdered. I will show you how much he must suffer for my name's sake. And Ananias departed and entered the house, and after laying his hands on him said, Brother Saul, not enemy Saul now, he's no longer enemy. He's no longer the opposition, but now he's the brother. Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road by which you were coming, has sent me to you, that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Spirit of God, Ruah Elohim. And the Genesis 1 and 2 is a very, very beautiful verse. It starts out, we have Genesis 1 and 1, it says, in beginnings, Barashith bara Elohim et hashemayim et haaretz. In beginnings, and one of the beginnings, God had created the heavens and the earth. And then it says, we haaretz. We haaretz means what? And the earth. We, and, page 253, Brown, Driver, and Briggs. Ha, page 206, Brown, Driver, and Briggs. Eretz, 76, in Brown, Driver, and Briggs. And the earth, hathya. She had become. What is that verb? How do you conjugate that verb? We hathya. Third person, feminine singular, Cal perfect. She had become bohu watohu. She had become formless and void. And then it says, Ruah Elohim. Ruah Elohim. Ruah Elohim. Spirit God suffered over, mourned over the faces of the deep. Mourned over the faces of the deep. That's a picture of salvation. Spirit God tries to woo every one of us that are lost. Every human being that's in the world, Spirit God mourns over you. He mourns over you. He said, recover your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And immediately he fell from his eyes something like scales, and he regained his sight, and he rose and was baptized. That's the first thing that a child of God, when he gets saved, he ought to be baptized, scripturally, by the way. Not just dipping, but by the authority of a New Testament church. Last Wednesday night, I preached on the bride of Christ. There's a whole lot of difference between the bride of Christ, idea of the bride of Christ, and what real bride of Christ is. We, in the there's a family of God, everybody that's saved is in the family of God, aren't they? The kingdom of God, the family, I talked about the church, the family, the kingdom, and the bride. The family of God is everybody that's born again. Okay, the kingdom of God. Who is the administrator in the kingdom of God on earth today? God did not postpone his kingdom, did he?
Makes sense.
The church is. All right. Now what is the church? Those ones called out. Jesus established his church, and Satan duplicated many facsimiles, which are false churches of all sorts and all different flavors and levels. And then the bride. The bride is those members in true New Testament churches that are faithful, and that is a few. I can tell you that I've been born again. I'm saved. And I've seen many people. The Apostle Paul, you know what? I believe he's going to be in the bride. Do you think so? But what did it cost him? What did it cost Paul to be in the bride? Not somebody just come to church on Sunday morning. Somebody that's working all during the week. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and every other thing that you can do. That's very faithful people. Very faithful people. That's what's going to make up the bride. Not just scriptural baptism won't get you there. Now, we're saved by grace totally, aren't we? But in 19th chapter of the book of Revelation, what it says, the bride has made herself ready. That's something you do after you've been saved. And what was she clothed with? The righteous works of the saints. That's the bride. Let's go on a little further. And he took food and was strengthened. And then Saul begins to preach Christ. Now for several days he was with the disciples, that's the church, the ones, the habitual learners, who were at Damascus. And immediately he began to proclaim Jesus in the synagogue, saying that he is the Son of God. In where? Synagogues. Now, what is the Apostle Paul going to be? He's going to be an outlaw and a victim. He's going to be like Jesse James and Frank. He's going to be forced to be an outlaw, isn't he? Not because he wants to be. Now he's an outlaw. He has to be an outlaw, doesn't he? Because he can't do anything else. He knows the truth. How many of you become outlaws in your family when you get saved? I was talking to a family the other day, and we were talking about the conversion of Jehovah's Witnesses. Do you know how hard it is for a Jehovah's Witness to get converted? How many of you know Mike McBroom? Mike McBroom got saved. He was a Jehovah's Witness. He was trying to bring in the kingdom. He was going and telling everybody in his family how to be saved and everything. To be safe, because Charles Taze Russell in the Watchtower said in 1975 that the end of the world was coming, and they sold everything. A lot of people sold all their property, didn't they? And they built these big super Jehovah's Witness places. That one out there on Brundage was built at that period of time. They built these places, and they have no windows. You know, this is a fortress to protect these people in the end times. Well, it came and went. And boy, did the wind get knocked out of his sails. Well, later on, he got saved. And you know what happened when he got saved? He never saw his wife and his family again. They cut you off from the world. You're gone. You don't exist anymore. If you're a Jehovah's Witness and you go into one of those assemblies, you have to come in late and you have to leave early. You can't say anything, and nobody can say a word to you. You can go to the assembly, but you're ostracized. And if you become an infidel, they don't talk to you at all. How much does it cost somebody to become, that's a Jehovah's Witness, that's been raised in Jehovah's Witness fact? What does it cost them to be saved? Everything. Everything. It costs them everything. Finally, the Lord, Mike had given it up. He didn't expect he'd ever see his children, his grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, or anything. Finally, they started coming around 30 years later. Long, long time. But you know what? He was saved. And he wanted his children to be saved. He wanted his grandchildren to be saved. But they cut him off. And all those hearing him continued to be amazed and were saying, "Is this not the one, not he who in Jerusalem destroyed those who are called on this name, and who had come here for the purpose of bringing them bound before the chief priests?" And Saul kept increasing in strength and confounding the Jews who lived at Damascus by proving that this Jesus is the Christ. Boy, when you get one of those on the other side converted, something really happens sometimes, doesn't it? Look at that hussy there at the 4th chapter of the Gospel of John, that what we call woman of questionable character that got saved, and she went in there and told Samaria, and they just poured out, "This woman is talking religion." You know, boy, something must have happened out here. When the Apostle Paul was saved, the world got shook up, didn't it? Why do you think God grabbed him and aborted him and took him out of the claws of Satan and put him in the hands of Jesus? Verse number 23, "And when many days had elapsed, the Jews plotted together to do away with him." Guess what? Now he's on the hit list. Jews kill people. Here we have a man that was a leader of the Jews. Even Gamaliel said, "Leave these people alone." They wouldn't follow the leaders. Paul the apostle was an elite leader. He was part of the Sicarii. He was what we call the zealot. And now he got converted. But their plot became known to Saul, and they were also watching. And the gates day and night, so that they might put him to death. But the disciples took him by night and let him down through an opening in a wall, lowering him in a large basket. And I've been there where they say that happened. This really happened. This is what happened. They had to sneak him out of town. Had to sneak him out of town. And when he had come to Jerusalem, he was trying to associate with the disciples, and they were all afraid of him. Now he goes back to where he came from, in his own hometown, and guess what? These disciples are scared to death of him. They don't believe him. Not believing that he was a disciple, but Barnabas took hold of him and brought him to the apostles and described to them how he had seen the Lord on the road, and that he had talked with him, and how at Damascus he had spoken out boldly in the name of Jesus, and that he had a hit list. He was on the hit list too. And he was with them, moving about freely in Jerusalem, speaking out boldly in the name of the Lord. And he was talking and arguing with Hellenistic Jews. Who are these Hellenistic Jews? Huh? They are the ones that spoke Greek only. And they are ones that studied the Septuagint only. Now, the Apostle Paul was different, wasn't he? He quoted the Greek Septuagint a lot, but he could speak Hebrew, and he could write Hebrew, and he could read the Hebrew Scriptures. He was a Hebrew of Hebrews. In other words, he was a Hebrew speaking Hebrew in the house in his own home. But they were attempting to put him to death. But when the brethren learned of it, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him away to Tarsus. So the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria enjoyed peace, being built up and going on in the fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Holy Spirit. It continued to increase. Now let's go back and look at just for a moment. What was Paul doing to the church? He was ravaging it like a coyote, like a ravaging wolf. Brother Mike, you've been out in the country where they had sheep and everything out there, and the coyotes come in and they will rip the little babies as they're born up and just rip them apart. Paul the Apostle was ripping little children apart, young children of God. They might be 20 or 30 years old when they were born again, but he would come to them and kill them. Remember what happened to this young woman that was saved not too long ago back there? She was a court recorder or something. They arrested her and put her in jail because she wouldn't issue those marriage license. You know, she was a young Christian. She just said she just couldn't do that. Yes.
So there were churches already established in these places?
In Damascus, yes, there was church in Damascus. Damascus was a very, if you go through all, who established the churches in Decapolis? That now is around Jerash in Jordan. The churches had spread very quickly. They were persecuted and they spread out, and where they went, they made churches, didn't they? I went over there to Pismo Beach and we were talking to Brett, and I said, we need to build church here. So we had a church service. We're going to try to have a church service over there now and then, or a mission service, really, in all reality. Wherever you go, build a church. Don't go any place if you're not going to build a church. Build a church there. Don't move someplace unless you're going to build a church or have a church or honor God in any way that you can there. The Apostle Paul, wherever he went, he killed these Christians. And there was a well-established church there in Damascus, Syria. Now, we're at the end of the class. But remember Muhammad? What do all of the Islamic people say, all of the Muslims say, that Muhammad couldn't read and write? All right. That he never read the scriptures, and it wasn't possible that he borrowed from the Bible, which he did. The first route that he went on, trade route, for that widow that he married, he went down to Damascus. What do you think was in Damascus? A lot of Christians preaching the Bible, not writing it so much, because writing, though a Bible was very expensive. Very few people had Bibles. Only the preachers had it. And the preachers would memorize it, and they'd get up and preach it. And the teachers would memorize it, and they'd get up and teach it. And he was exposed to it there in Damascus, Syria. That church was there for years and years. Many, many years. The foundations of it are still, the church house are still there today. This man, Judah's house. His name was Judah. All right. Any other questions? Adriana, do you have any questions? No? Sister Andy.
One thing on verse 31, it says that they were edified.
Yes.
The churches were edified by knowing what Paul was doing.
This was their worst enemy. What's nice when you can get your worst enemy converted, isn't it? He was ravaging them, and what else? They had peace, didn't they? After the apostle, because there was nobody like Paul. Paul was a killer. He chased them down. But after he was out of the way, then what happened? The churches had peace, because they had the worst arch enemy now is one of them. He turned into one of them. Every now and then you get a Catholic priest converted, don't you? Every now and then you get a Mormon converted. Every now and then you get a Jehovah's Witness converted, and they try to help their people. They try to help their people. Well, thank you for your attention today, and go out and do something eternal. God bless each and every one of you. Who is Brother David?